Right, let's take you through what's happening in Iran today. Iran is currently facing its worst crisis. Iran is looking at its lowest point in 50 years. It's witnessing its biggest internal crisis in decades. Tonight is day 12 of nationwide protests in Iran. Anger is spreading from Tehran to Mashhad, Isfahan, Shiraz, Tabriz. Several other major cities in Iran currently are seeing protests with people out on the streets. Government buildings have been set on fire. Protesters are chanting for freedom, openly calling for the end of the regime. As protesters there are out on the streets and protests intensifies, the Iranian government has responded with a near total internet blackout and suspension of international phone services as well. Internet monitoring firms, Cloudflare and NetBlocks confirm this is not a technical failure. They say that this is direct state interference. Iranian state television has stayed silent so far. Human rights groups, though, have warned of brutal crackdown. The Norway-based watchdog in Iran, a human rights group, says at least 45 protesters have been killed, including 8 children. Hundreds are injured. More than 2,000 people have been arrested. What began as protests over a collapsing economy has now turned into the most direct challenge to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in years that he's seen. Iran's currency has crashed to over 1.4 million rials to the dollar, the lowest it's been. Prices of food, fuel and daily essentials in Iran has surged exponentially. Economic pain quickly has turned into political, with streets there flooded with people saying that we don't want any corrections here, we want just the government to go. And they're chanting slogans like death to the dictator. And now an old name has returned to the conversation. If not for Khamenei, who else in Iran? Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of Iran's last Shah. He's now come out putting out videos urging Iranians to stay on the streets and fight the clerical regime. From the US, he's right now in the US, he's putting out videos, he's calling for this to be a decisive moment and asked Western governments to also help restore internet access and help bring peace to Iran, while also urging people to come out on the streets in hordes and protest against the current regime. Videos are circulating of the protests. Let me show you the protests there across Iran. Before the blackout showed crowds chanting Pahlavi's name. In fact, they say Pahlavi will return. Those are the slogans. While saying death to dictator, they also raised slogans asking for Pahlavi's return. Slogans that were unthinkable just a year ago, where people would be imprisoned if they said something like that. Today, people in Iran are openly calling for it. This is the first real test of whether Iranians are willing to rally behind the Shah's son to become the next leader, more than 4 decades after the 1979 revolution that ended his family's rule, the monarchy, and brought the Khamenei rule, the clerical rule. Iranian state media has at this point blamed all the unrest entirely on the United States and Israel. In fact, Khamenei for the first time came out and spoke today. It was his first appearance after 12 days of unrest. He came out and spoke, addressed the people of Iran, where he said that he will ensure the US will be punished for doing what they've done. He says the Trump regime will fall, and there were chants against America, there were chants against Israel. For now, United States has kept silent. They have not said anything. They have not even backed any alternative regime or leadership for Iran, but they warned against human rights violations. The government of Iran, of course, at this point is looking very, very restless. The fear barrier is breaking. People are looking more spirited than ever, fighting against the government. The country is entering one of the most uncertain moments in modern history. I'm going to take you through the reactions first of the Supreme Leader Khamenei reacting to the protests, and the possible alternative, Reza from the United States.
مزدوری بیگانگان رو تحمل نمیکنه. شما هر کی میخوای باش مزدور بیگانه که شدی، برای بیگانه که کار کردی، ملت تو رو مردود میدانه. نظام اسلامی هم تو رو مردود میدانه. این مربوط به اینها. اون بابایی که با نخوت و غرور نشسته اونجا راجع به همه دنیا قضاوت میکنه او هم بدانه که معمولاً مستبدین و مستکبران عالم از قبیل فرعون و نمرود و رضاخان و محمد رضا و امثال اینها وقتی که در اوج غرور بودند سرنگون شدند. این هم سرنگون خواهد شد.
این پیامی مستقیم خطاب به نیروهای مسلح و امنیتی ایران است. شما که لباس نظامی بر تن کرده اید تا از ملت ایران دفاع کنید و اینک در معرض یک انتخاب تاریخی قرار دارید. در روزهایی که مردم شجاع و متحد ایران در حال ساختن و نوشتن تاریخ هستند، پرسش من از شما این است که در کدام سوی تاریخ خواهید ایستاد؟ در کنار جنایتکاران یا در کنار مردم؟ در این لحظه های سرنوشت ساز از شما انتظار دارم که به آغوش ملت بازگردید و سلاح خود را نه برای شلیک به مردم که برای حفاظت از آنها به کار گیرید.
We'll take a look. We're watching it very closely. If they start killing people like they have in the past, I think they're going to get hit very hard by the United States.
Right, let's bring in our panelists to give us a little more in detail to what we see in Iran, if there could be an impact of what's happening there in India, what's India's response to it. Ambassador Jayant Das Gupta, former ambassador to the WTO. We also have Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar, defense and geopolitical expert. We also have Abhijit Iyer Mitra, who is a senior research fellow, IPCS. Thanks very much, all of you, for joining us. I'll start with Ambassador Jayant Das Gupta. Sir, your take on this. Iran is seeing the worst ever unrest in the last 50 years that we've seen. Briefly in 2022, the anti-hijab protests after the death of Mahsa Amini broke out, but it couldn't sustain. They couldn't sustain. Women couldn't sustain. Today we're seeing men, women, children all out on the streets, and the regime not hesitating in shooting down those resisting, including children. 7 children have been killed.
I think we have to take a step back and look at the history of Iran after 1979. There have been protests, popular protests in 1999, 2009, 2011 and 12, and in 2017 and 18 against the hijab, and 2019 when apparently 1,500 people died. The cause of that protest in 2019 was 50 to 200% increase in fuel prices, and women and children and people of all age groups had joined that movement. Of course, it was suppressed. It took a few months. Similarly, in Mahsa Amini's case of 2022, it began on the 16th of September 2022, but it ended petered out by about March. So there have been protests in the past, and in some of these protests, including in the 2019 protests, it was one of the slogans which was raised was about the change of regime of Maulana Khamenei, Ayatollah Khamenei. So this is not something new, and I think this again has been triggered off by the very extraordinary price rise and the hardship it is causing to the common people. But I think the situation has changed. Khamenei is about 86 years old. He is supposedly not keeping good health, and Iran, for instance, has said that the Omani foreign minister will be visiting. Oman has been acting as a go-between the Iranian regime and the US, and the foreign minister is visiting. President Trump has already given out a threat that if the protest is quelled by use of force, people get killed, then the US will intervene. So I think the situation is very fluid.
Can I ask you, maybe I could bring in Abhijit here. Abhijit, what's your sense on US involvement here? Khamenei was, for the first time he spoke, he addressed his crowds, not the protesters, in a very controlled environment. He spoke and he entirely blamed and attributed the unrest to United States involvement and Israel. So there were chants against Israel, against America. He said American regime will fall, Trump will, as fast as he came, he'll disappear. So pinning the entire blame on international forces except for, looking inward. But looking at it diplomatically, we know US has and its habits. It's often involved in other countries' politics. Do you believe or see a US involvement here?
Look, the US involvement is as far as, talking up these protests as something huge. For example, if you read the New York Times or Washington Post about India, you'll think the new government offices that were built were gas chambers meant to gas off the minorities. You know that's clearly not the case. Now, in Iran, there have consistently been three groups of protesters. Excuse me. The first are concentrated in Mashhad, Isfahan, and Tehran, and they are usually the urban student community, which is what started off the Mahsa Amini protests. The second group of protesters are the political protesters, because the government, if you want a future in politics, if you want any kind of thing to happen, the government marks you off. Your local muezzin on the street has to tick your attendance at government-sponsored protests, but those aren't anti-government protests. The third, which is the most numerous protest, which is also the bulk of the current protests that you're seeing, and was the bulk of the 2019 protest that Ambassador was talking about, are the people who come out on the streets because of economic hardship, which is very, very common because, inflation is insane right now. It's running at 40% month on month in Tehran at the moment. And life is very, very, very hard. So what happens is every time the economic protesters come on, the students usually either tag on their agenda, the monarchists tag on their agenda, and the government actually really likes it when the students join in and when the monarchists join in. Because honestly, I have family in Iran. I've toured Iran very extensively. I've lived there for a cumulative total of about 8-9 months. I can tell you the Shah is treated as something of a joke. He exists only in the narratives of Israeli tweeters and American New York Times subscribers, and nowhere else in reality does he exist on the ground out there.
So you're saying Reza Pahlavi has no standing?
Zero standing. Zero standing.
But
You go ask anybody in Tabriz,
slogans being
Mashhad,
raised asking for Pahlavi to return.
yes, you will have about 200-300 people who will rock up everywhere, and it suits the government for them to do it because they immediately connect it with their narrative and the school indoctrination of how bad the Shah period was, and they use it to crack down on genuine economic grievances. So every time the students, the hijab protesters, anti-hijab protesters come out, or these Reza, we don't know if they're actual supporters of Reza Pahlavi or they're paid by the government to actually take Reza Pahlavi's name. It becomes an immediate trigger, you see. The government then says, oh, this isn't about economics. This is about regime change. You are American puppets. You are Israeli puppets. And we're going to crack down on you. And they start shooting their own people. That is what ends up happening. There is a reason, Nabila, that none of these protests have ever succeeded. This one will also not succeed because the level of control the government has, it's sort of the democratization of corruption almost in a sense. And the way it works is truly something spectacular to behold. The level of control extends to every single seat. If there is a protest that is going to change the government out there, I bet you this isn't going to be it.
Okay. From what we see here, if I could bring in Major General Rajan Kochar, sir, your sense of Iran, its military, its supreme leadership, its military and the backing that they have, do you believe they could sustain, suppose there is a coup in a sense from any opposing country or US and Israel trying to act together against Iran? Are they prepared? Are they strong militarily? They're using military forces right now to stop their protesters on their tracks, but they're failing miserably.
Thank you, Nabila, for inviting me for this wonderful discussion. heard a political perspective. I've heard a diplomatic or a foreign perspective. Now let's get to the military perspective. See now, things in Iran. It's very very clear that it has the footprints of the U.S. deep state in triggering this kind of a situation in Iran. Absolutely clear. I would like to expolate with a situation in Bangladesh also. See who are the people who are getting targeted in Iran. It's the Gen X there. 60% of the population of Iran is less than 35 years of age. So now you see, as is, is Mitra also actually brought out, Abhijit has also brought out, that the people on the street are the younger generation. Uh, if I do a demographic study of Iran and I divide Iran into two parts, the urban and the rural part of it, you will find this largely protests are in the urban areas and very, very less in the rural areas. Because in the rural areas, there is still an ideological affiliation to Khomeini and they still, follow and respect him. Uh, but in the urban areas, it's not happening. So let's see the military perspective now. Uh, Iran is a very strong country with regard to its missile technology and its missile arsenals. We saw in this 12 days war with Israel that it was Israel which blinked first. It was not Iran. Because from the ninth day, you saw the destruction in Tel Aviv because their interceptors stockpile had actually gone down. And not more than 500 missiles were fired by Iran. And Iran has approximately 3,500 to 4,000 missiles. So it still had the capability to stretch this war up to at least 30 to 45 days. But Israel didn't have the capability to stretch it, and that's why the US also came in and uh, pitched in and got actually embroiled in this battle. So, as I see things in Iran as of now, I don't think US will get into a warlike situation as Trump has been threatening that in case there are casualties or something like that, we will intervene. I don't think US
Iran
is.
is militarily strong enough to thwart that, and therefore countries like the United States right now won't move in. But human rights violations are glaring. You have a lot of countries have spoken about it. Internet blackout, people are being shot dead, children have been killed. So I'm not too sure if Iran gets a free hand to do this and how long, because this is turning into a human rights violation case. And Masa Amini time, 2022 to now, there are thousands and thousands of people who've been imprisoned. This can't go on without questions being raised, Ambassador. Can't no one stop this? Has India responded to this? Has India reacted to this?
I think you are asking a very important question, but just roll back the clock a little bit and look at Gaza. What happened in Gaza? Weren't children killed, women killed, old people killed, non-combatants killed? And who intervened? So I think it is not going to be, the case that the international community will intervene in the case of Iran. And what I see is that there is no rallying point. Reza Pahlavi is only an apology. His grandfather had usurped and then had used various, means to project that he was part of the empire, 1,000-year-old empire. Not this Reza Pahlavi whose picture you're showing, but his father, who came to power in 1925
Yeah.
through a coup. So it is not that it is a long-standing monarchy and Reza Pahlavi is the last surviving member, etc. He is just the grandson of the person who had engineered a coup.
He
And
moved to the
uh,
US when he was 17. So
that's
he's
right.
just, he
That's
feels
right.
like an entitled opposition leader.
Yeah. So the problem is that because the theocratic regime has been in power since 1979, and there is a 12-member Guardian Council, and people are nominated to that Guardian Council by the Ayatollah. And the Guardian Council in turn decides who can fight an election. So people with, whose views are not, in line with the thinking of the Guardian Council and the Ayatollah, they're not allowed to fight the elections. So this is kind of continuing for the last 57 years, and there is no rallying point, no opposition. This is the spontaneous
Khamenei has
protest.
crushed all opposition. So look, as much as you and Abhijit said that it was a dark era before 79, and look what Khamenei has done in the last 50 years. He's crushed all opposition. He's made it, a hardcore Islamic regime where people barely are allowed to speak their mind. It's a total authoritarian regime in that sense. And now people realize that, maybe the days before 79 was better. I don't know. Could you give us a little comparison? Abhijit, would you remember or recollect through your readings and expertise of what may have been the situation of Iran before 79? At least as a woman, I saw no hijab at that point, right? So from there to now, Iran has come a long way. I don't know for the bad or for worse, good or for bad.
Be fair, look, I think, going just by the hijab becomes a one-point analysis, and that's not very good.
Right.
We need to remember that this regime also pioneered a lot of women's education programs and things like that. Are they a nasty, brutal, dictatorial regime? Yes. Was the previous regime also nasty, dictatorial, and brutal? Unfortunately, yes. The Savak were notorious. The secret police of the Shah were notorious. People were disappeared. They would be, their fingernails would be pulled out, their eyes would be pulled out. Horrible things would happen to people out there. And, especially being an Indian, we need to remember an isolated Iran, an ostracized Iran, is very good for India. The Shah was a notorious supporter of Pakistan. He used to keep giving them financial help, military help, and all kinds of things. The Shah going may not have been very good for Iran, but I can tell you personally it was very good for India. And the isolation of Iran has certainly served India very well, number one. Number two, when we talk about human rights, we need to separate between, rights that are proscribed in Iran now, which were proscribed even then. The only right that hasn't changed, that has the restriction that has changed is that Iranian women have to cover their hair. And remember, in the Shah's time, there still is a huge urban rural divide, which is why, the hijab protests, the Mesa Amini protests, they never took off beyond the cities. Look, urban areas will always be much more progressive, rural
Yeah.
areas will be much more conservative. But in Iran, there are even big cities. So, for example, Shiraz or Tabriz are very conservative cities. Shiraz, Tabriz, Qum, you will not go around without wearing a full chador. In Isfahan, Mashhad, or Tehran, you will barely cover your hair and move around. We also need to remember the human rights we're talking about here. Uh, Protesters have human rights till they start burning buildings. Once you burn buildings, you've crossed a certain law and order line, and certain law and order is required. I just want to touch quickly, Nabila, if you permit me, on taking off on what General Saab said. You know, we need to remember Iran has two militaries. They've got the official Army, Navy, Air Force, and then they've got the IRGC, Army, Navy, Air Force, which control disloyalty within the Army, Navy, Air Force. So they've got an air force to control the air force.
Wow.
Which is why they are not. Which is why the Israelis made them look very, very bad a few months back when they were bombing Iran. It's a very dysfunctional military in a way, but it's very functional in terms of regime control. We also need to remember that Trump may be able to bomb, but he's not going to be able to regime change. This is a country of 1.6 million square kilometers. It's half the size of India. People think of it as desert. Sure, it is arid, but it is heavily mountainous, extremely rugged, very, very high mountains. It snows in Tehran. The central Zagros Mountains are some of the tallest mountains in Asia. Your best of luck trying to control it. They weren't able to control Afghanistan. Iran, to sorry to use a Hindi term, but बहुत दूर की बात है.
I don't know. It looks like a trap for people in Iran. It's just sad. They have nowhere to go then. If that's the case, and this is, Khamenei has not been able to convince its people, the country's people, for now, what, 5 years, they've been agitating against the regime. And today the protests are looking so bad and so many killed, he comes out to entirely blame this on America and Israel, not looking inward. So I highly doubt that they're even willing to reconcile or speak with the people who are protesting. I don't know how they're going to go forward with this. But India's response to it, has there been any response? And what, in your view, is the relationship that India shares with the Khamenei regime? Ambassador, or any one of you could answer that.
In terms of our economic relations, we were buying oil even after the sanctions against Iran. Through a state-owned bank in India, which did not have any foreign branches. But then the US tightened its sanctions and we stopped buying completely. But trade in rupee terms still goes on at a very low level. So that is all that we have. And people-to-people contacts have been there, of course, and before the US tightened its controls, there were many PSUs, which were public sector enterprises of India, which were working in Iran, and some private companies were also working in Iran in executing projects. But I think that may have come down quite sharply. And there was also an exchange of students, and I remember from my university, professors had been going and teaching in Mosul and in Tehran and other parts of Iran. But that was a long, long time ago. I think after 1979, things would have come down sharply, and this exchange of students, etc., that would have come down to a thin trickle, if not stopped completely.
Could we see this as endgame? From the sense I got from all of you, you say no. Is this momentary then? General Rajan, would you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I'll just come. See, President Trump is a man who's in a hurry. So I don't see this situation from stopping here. It is going to aggravate. And that is my reading. I mean, people may have different opinions, but Trump is going to push this thing very, very fast.
Okay.
And,
so you're saying it will topple the Khamenei regime?
Yes, I think so.
Abhijit, as I'm almost to the end of this, what would be your take? Could this be the death knell?
The Shah couldn't bring himself to shoot his people. Iran that I've been to is a government that is more than willing to shoot its people. And once you're willing to shoot your people, there's very little one can do to remove you. Remember, I just draw your attention to Saddam Hussein. It didn't matter how many sanctions weakened him, no matter what was done, short of a full-scale invasion, he couldn't be toppled.
So which is why the international community may have more power to push, to corner him?
Corner him, but they can't do anything unless they actually go in out there. The way in which the regime controls every single apparatus of power, the way the elites have been co-opted into, the sanctions busting, smuggling economy. The former president, he was known as Mr. Pista because all the pistas produced in Iran, Rafsanjani, he was known as Pista Rafsanjani because all the pistas produced and smuggled both in and out of the country were Rafsanjanis. The current president is known to have, he's known to have certain medical smuggling businesses, medicines and so on and so forth. We need to remember, it isn't a control government, it's a dictatorial democratization of corruption government. They are politically centralized, but their corruption is democratized. So everybody's kind of, it's a very curious system where everybody's incentivized in the corruption.
That's insane. Final word, Ambassador, your final take on, probably the first time that I would maybe, I don't know if I want to praise Trump, but I wish, Trump would do something.
I just wanted to throw out a red herring. The Pakistanis have been asked to send troops to maintain the peace in Gaza, and they are very reluctant to do that. I think if President Trump is serious about Iran, he may ask the Pakistanis to do something in Iran, because they do share a long boundary.
No, look, Israel attacked Iran recently, just barely a few months ago, or maybe a year.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. So Pakistan may be asked to act as a kind of an intermediary and incite the protests.
No, why Pakistan? Why do you think Trump will not? Why do you think Trump can activate Israel against Iran right now to topple the regime?
I entirely agree with Abhijit when he says that the way things are there, and in addition to what he said, the Iranian people are extremely nationalistic and patriotic, as are in most countries. But one of the things which drives them is this feeling of martyrdom. The long Iran-Iraq war, more than 1 million people were killed, and Iran hardly batted an eyelid because it was all martyrdom for them. Yes, sorry, I'll stop here.
No, General Rajan? You're on mute.
I just want to bring a perspective here. You see, Abhijit is a very well-read person. He knows Iran so well, and Ambassador. We all are thinking in a stereotype manner. Trump does not think like this. So you have to get into the shoes of Trump. And when you get into the shoes of Trump, then impossible is also possible. So I have a strong feeling something big will happen soon. It won't take a very long time. It won't take months, because if Trump means business, he has just made a very important statement today that I don't respect international world order. I do things on my own assumptions. I do things what is logical to me and what I think is moral. And so what is the morality, definition of morality Trump has within his own mind? So let us try to analyze this man, because
understood. The Venezuelan opposition leader who got the Nobel Prize at this point thanks Trump for what he did in Venezuela and says, I hope he should take my Nobel Prize. So that's that's where we've come down to. But we're going to observe very closely to see what's happening in Iran, and we will be on this story. Thanks very much, all of you, for joining us.